If you're looking for a really good GT cruiser that has great handling and performance and it sounds really cool and there's not very many of them out there, this is the car for you. The question I'm asking myself is, what cool enthusiast-based sedans or sports cars are out there in a bargain today? That's a tough question because of the high prices we've experienced over the past few years. A perfect example is the 997 Porsche, which has hit a peak just recently and is definitely not a bargain today. There are a lot of bargains out there, but we're going to focus on cars that are from the last 10 years. That keeps it fairly recent, as well as in some cases has a warranty. And we're going to have a budget for everyone. I do have a ranking in my head for this list, but we're going to go through everything alphabetical because they're really unique individual cars and all of them offer a lot of value. First up is the Alfa Romeo 4C. They originally sold around $65,000 and they were sold from 2013 until 2020, and they came out with editions that were the coupe and a spider, a bunch of special editions, and finally they did a very expensive Tributo Stradale. It came with a 237 horsepower turbocharged 1.7 liter and weighed in around 2,500 pounds. The 4C is a great sports car, and it was in the spirit of the Lotus Exige, although about 600 pounds heavier than the Lotus Exige, which was probably a positive because the Lotus Exige was a little fragile. There's only two negatives to the 4C in my opinion, and that was one, it didn't come with a manual transmission offering, and two, that it was made by Alfa, which over the years has had some questionable reliability. That being said, this car was pretty reliable for all the owners, and I even had a friend who had one for years. So what have sales been like on this car? So let me take a look at the numbers, and you can take a look at the chart. And so there's been 74 of them listed on Cars and Bids as well as on Bring a Trailer. Only 23 of them did not meet the reserve. I say only, but that's 31%, which is 50% more than the average on those two sites of a 20% no sale perspective. These cars have been pretty solid, and you can see on the chart how they're pretty much selling along the same line, and they're in the 40s right now and pretty stabilized at that. I think that potentially they could drop a little bit lower, but not too much. At this point in time, if you get a little bit higher mileage, you can even dip it below the 40s or around 40, and that's a lot of car for the money and a lot of performance for the money. Next up is a car that I've owned, which doesn't narrow it down a whole lot, but it is the Ford GT350. The GT350 came out in 2015 with an MSRP around $56,000 for the base model, and it weighed in about 3,800 pounds. It came with a 5.2 liter flat plane crank Voodoo engine that made 526 horsepower, and it was only paired with a 6-speed manual transmission. No auto or dual clutch came along with it. The only two issues that I had heard of that were significant with the car were relative to cooling and to braking, and those were in some of the early model years, and so those were the only things that you had to worry about early on. Let's take a look at the sales numbers on the GT350s. I'm going to compile the data from Bring a Trailer as well as Cars and Bids, and we're going to take a look at that right now. Since 2016, there's been 290 of them listed, with 38 of them not making the reserve. So that's a 15% no sale, which is slightly better than the average. Average price on these has been around $55,700, and the pricing on the GT350s, excluding the special editions, have been around that range. One thing to keep in mind is if you get a higher mileage version of this, they'll be around the 40s, and that's a whole lot of performance for the price. And so I think that this offers a ton of value in today's market. If I was looking at one of these and going to get one of these, I would get a high mileage version and I would drive it like I stole it. Next up is another great performer on track and off, and I know it's a little cliche to pick this, but that's for a reason. So we have the Mazda Miata, specifically the NC, which was made from 2006 to 2015, and there was a facelift in 2012 in there as well. The NC Miata came with a 170 horsepower 2-liter engine. Even with the low horsepower, it still does very well on track and off, and it's a ton of fun. It's almost like a little golf cart. While the Miata isn't really for everyone, it is still a great performer, and I would be remiss if I didn't put it on this list, especially at the prices that we're looking at. So let's get into the sales data. For the sales on this car, I'm combining both Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer as well, and there's 53 of them listed, and only 4 did not sell. That's a 7% no sale, and that takes the record for no sale percentages. If you look at this chart, you can see that some of these prices are essentially in the teens, and you're just getting a lot of car for this money. I doubt that the price is going to drop a whole lot more, so I think it's a lot of car for the money at this point, and I think that this is a good buy. Next up is a genuine supercar in some of its variations, as well as the Formula One pace car. That is the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT. So this started production in 2015, and they have a ton of variations. Everything from a GT, GTS, GTR, GTR Pro, GT Black Series, I'm not kidding. And then there's some special editions that come along with that. It ranges everywhere in horsepower from 450 all the way to 720 horsepower. And these things have an MSRP range that's as wide. These cars look amazing and have a killer sound. The same engine comes in most of the variations, with a tune being the only difference to it. If you're looking for a really good GT cruiser that has great handling and performance and it sounds really cool, and there's not very many of them out there, this is the car for you. One thing to keep in mind on this car, in many of its variations, it's a multi-$100,000 car, so maintenance and parts replacement is going to be commensurate with that price. So just keep that in mind if you are going to get into this, as maintenance will be a little bit higher. From an issue perspective, these did have some transmission issues, and the service procedure for changing the fluids in the transmission has been quite complicated, and that probably exacerbated the problem. It's nothing that would keep me away from this car, but I'd keep that in mind if I was going to buy one. Speaking of transmission, this entire lineup comes with a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. No other transmission offering is available for it. Now let's get into the sales figures on these cars. So if I combine Bring a Trailer and Cars and Bids, there's been 121 of them listed, and 47 of them have not met reserve, and that's a 39% no sale, and that's for the whole group. One thing to keep in mind on this is the GT and GTSs have been almost 50% no sale. And so while the Black Series and some of the higher ends have been selling very high percentages, the lower end versions have really bottomed out, and there's been a lot of no sales on those. So that's either indicating that we've hit a bottom or that they're about to dip a little bit more. Now for these GT and GTSs, they've been selling around 80, with higher mileage versions and certain ones dipping down into the 70s. And so that is something that is presenting an opportunity, and I think that we're going to see some 60s here very soon. All right, next up we have a sedan in the Porsche Panamera. Big Daddy Doug Demuro has mentioned this in several of his videos, that it offers a lot of performance for the cost, and I couldn't agree more. I've spent some time with this car on track, and you wouldn't know that you were in as big of a car as it is. I would never buy one new, but at these price levels that we're going to get into, it offers a lot of performance for cost. There are a ton of models and variations with this car across 2 different generations. So the generations were 09 to 2016 and 2016 to present. From a horsepower perspective, it ranged from 320 horsepower all the way to up to 690 horsepower. While these cars have had some issues, they've been pretty reliable and solid. From a performance relative to the cost that you have to pay, it's almost unmatched in the market today. So let's take a look at the sales on these. From a sales perspective across Bring a Trailer and Cars and Bids, there's been 73 of them listed, with 24 of them not making reserve and 33% no sale. Going price for a turbo, which is 500 horsepower, is in the 40s, and you can get it as low as $40,000. As I mentioned, I had driven a Turbo S on track previously and slid that thing around the track and was having an absolute blast, and I wouldn't have even known that I had people in the back seat if they wouldn't have been screaming and yelling. You can get lower spec models in the 20s that have 400 horsepower. So would you rather have a low spec Civic, or would you rather have a Porsche Panamera that has 400 horsepower with the kids and the golf clubs in the back? I think I'd probably go for the Porsche Panamera. All right, for our 6th and bonus car is the Toyota GR86, specifically the 2nd generation, which started production in 2020. The reason why this car didn't make the top 6, if you will, the whole list, was that it is in current production as well as it's in high demand. And so the prices are a little bit higher than I would like right now. And so that's why it didn't make the bargain list. But I think that it's a lot of performer for its cost. And so that's why I'm mentioning it here afterwards. I will mention that I owned one of these and I bought it in 2020 and then sold it later on for a little bit of a profit because the market was so high. I think it's come down some, but I think it probably still needs to come down a little bit more for it to be a bargain. Nonetheless, it is a great performer, and I think that it is a car that offers a lot of value out there in the market today. So if you're looking for a new car, which the previous cars were not, this may be the option for you for a nice fun weekend car or even a daily commuter if you're looking for something like that. This video was suggested and voted on by the subscribers to this YouTube channel. If you want to have a voice going forward of what content we deliver, then please make sure you subscribe to the channel, give me the thumbs up button, and keep an eye out for the community polls that come up where we're going to be voting on what content we deliver going forward. And I'll see you in the next one.